She smirked halfway through the sentence. That's what stuck with me. Not the words, not the paperwork, not even the way she glanced at the board like she was performing for a mirror. But that smirk. One side of her mouth curled up while she scrolled a text from her boyfriend, then casually slid the termination documents across the table. "You're stuck in old thinking," she said, tapping the pen on top of the folder, like I was just another quarterly report that didn't meet expectations. "We need a faster pace, younger energy." I didn't say a word. I didn't ask questions. I just looked at the signature line, my name already typed beneath it, and then back at her. She didn't meet my eyes. She was already flipping to her next tab. "My name is James Mercer. I'm 48 years old. Until 6 minutes ago, I was Chief Operations Officer for Halston Freight Systems, a $900 million logistics and distribution company with government contracts, international trade routes, and 29 domestic hubs. I was brought in 2 years ago to fix what the family dynasty had nearly destroyed with ego, nepotism, and bad math. When I arrived, the company was hemorrhaging money through outdated routing algorithms and 3 separate labor disputes. By the time I was done, revenue had tripled, costs were slashed by a third, and union negotiations were locked in for 5 years. I wasn't the face of the company. I was its backbone. But now I was obsolete, according to her. Kira Halston, 27, Ivy League Polish with TikTok gloss. Her father had a stroke 6 months ago and retreated to his lakeside home in Vermont, leaving her with the crown and an executive team that didn't know whether to clap or duck. She had a way of speaking, like every sentence was being auditioned for a podcast, sharp, breathy, rehearsed. Her boyfriend Cody, some pseudo-entrepreneur who sells thought leadership ebooks about grind-set mentality, had been installed last quarter as our new head of strategic growth. No experience, no credentials, just cheekbones, connections, and a decent ring light. They called it a new era of energy. I called it a hand grenade in a boardroom. I packed my briefcase slowly, not out of reluctance, habit. I never rushed the close. Papers, charger, backup drive, not a thing left behind. I stood, buttoned my coat, nodded once to the board, half of whom couldn't meet my gaze, and turned for the door. Kira didn't thank me, didn't stand, just looked back at her screen like she'd already forgotten I existed. On the walk out, I passed the old display wall, photos from the company's founding, truck convoys, cold storage units, ribbon cuttings from ports and bridges. Her grandfather had built it, brick by brick. Her father scaled it. I digitized it. And now she was live streaming its disassembly. They think old means slow. But I've always found that the quietest machine in the room runs the deepest code. I took the long hallway out, the one that looped around the analytics wing and server corridor. No one used it anymore. Not since she converted half the operations floor into a VR brainstorming lounge. The servers were still locked behind biometric access. I paused, just for a second, and placed my palm on the security glass beside the mainframe. Nothing happened. I didn't expect it to. But it felt necessary, like muscle memory. It was strange, walking away from something I'd built like a cathedral, stone by stone, silently, efficiently. I remembered nights sleeping under my desk during the 2021 reroute collapse. I remembered isolating the root cause of our third-quarter shipment failures down to 3 misaligned timestamps in a warehouse ERP module. I remembered replacing the fire suppression system myself when the contractor botched the wiring. And now I was just out. In the lobby, the receptionist stood up when she saw me. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Mercer, are you?" I smiled. "All good, Linda." She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Maybe she already knew. Maybe word was spreading through Slack, like wildfire. Outside, the wind had a snap to it. March chill biting at the back of my neck. I walked to my car, slid the briefcase into the back seat, and took one last look at the building. 6 floors of glass and steel. My fingerprints were on every bolt, every process, every line of code, but not for much longer. I started the engine, let the hum settle, then pulled out of the lot without checking the rearview mirror. Some people leave shouting, others leave in tears. I've always believed that the most dangerous person in the room is the one who says nothing at all. Let them laugh. Let them cheer the handover. I had already written the next chapter. They just didn't know they were in it. They say rot doesn't announce itself. It creeps in, quiet, methodical, patient. You don't notice until the beams groan, until the walls sweat, until the smell seeps through the paint. You can paint over it, sure, but paint doesn't stop decay. It just hides it until it's too late. It had been 2 weeks since Kira Halston slid my termination across the table, like it was an invoice for dry cleaning. 2 weeks since I walked out of Halston Freight Systems with every scrap of dignity and not a single byte of data. But I wasn't gone. Not really. I just changed vantage points. From the outside, everything looked fine. Press releases spoke of innovation, disruption, modernization. Agile decentralization, she called it, her first official initiative, a pretty phrase that meant, in practice, gutting middle management, offshoring contract negotiation, and pivoting core infrastructure to an app-based interface that she said would revolutionize logistics. No one told her you don't reinvent a backbone, you reinforce it. I watched from a remote relay node buried in the back end of the company's 3rd-tier vendor channel, one I'd written myself and hidden under a legacy billing module that hadn't been touched since 2018. They'd never find it, not unless they knew where to look, and the new CTO, a man named Brandon Wu, formerly a digital strategist at a rideshare startup, wasn't someone who looked under floorboards. He just kicked them and called it agile. Within a week, I saw the first cracks, system alerts, cross-channel misfires, payment batches rerouting into voids. One flagged loop sent the same invoice 17 times to a ghost supplier in Abu Dhabi. Another sent a priority shipping alert to a warehouse we sold in 2020. They were shrugging it off. Glitches, transfer latency, third-party API bugs. But I knew better. I built Halston's core, the way I used to wire field bunkers in Laos. Redundant, compartmentalized, locked behind protocols only I could trigger. Her father wanted a digital fortress that could survive cyber espionage, legal audits, and EMP-level catastrophe. I gave him that. I built systems that rerouted power through 3 grid lines. Systems that encrypted outbound data packets in real time. Systems that looked like spaghetti on paper, but ran like a scalpel in motion. And every single line of that backbone was signed in my fingerprint. They replaced the skin, the paint, the signage, but the bones were still mine. Monday of the 2nd week, 2 international clients disappeared. Not ghosted, vanished. One was a Vietnamese textile distributor, the other a Belgian freight partner tied to maritime routes. They pulled contracts mid-cycle, citing loss of communication and breach of SLA. I watched it happen in real time, watched the email headers bounce, watched the backup servers fail to deploy the redundancies, because those failovers were locked behind a code sequence I wrote, one I never handed over. Then came the CRM crash. It happened during a board demo. Their new UI, sleek, shiny, utterly non-functional, was supposed to show real-time shipment tracking across all nodes. Instead, it pulled from corrupted cache instances. Data rendered wrong. Some clients saw shipments routed to ports that didn't exist anymore. One got billed for a container already delivered 6 months ago. A live investor demo. 35 minutes of spinning wheels and error messages. Kira called it a beta hiccup. The board called it something else behind closed doors. I got the call that night. Private line, encrypted, no caller ID. I picked up, didn't speak. Mercer. The voice was gravel and bourbon. Saw the pipeline routing logs. Looks like you left a few fangs in the beast. Didn't leave anything, I said calmly. Just reminding it who built the walls. He chuckled. You watching it fall? Number I'm watching it forget. He paused. You need backup? Not yet. He hung up. That was Walter Shaw, ex-SOCOM, now running black site infrastructure out in Nevada. We worked together on a satellite logistics op in 2013. When he calls, you listen. But I wasn't ready to bring him in. This wasn't war. Not yet. It was still education. The board held an emergency session 3 days later. I wasn't in the room, but I knew what was said. They were trying to make sense of why their flagship platform, the one promised to investors, with 7 figures riding on it, was eating its own tail. Files were missing, reports were scrambled, audit trails led nowhere. What they didn't realize was this wasn't sabotage, it was entropy. When you build a system as dense as the one I designed, you also build rules. Gravity, inertia, resistance. And when you remove the one person who understands the physics, the machine doesn't explode. It just drifts. Bit by bit, wire by wire, until one day you try to open a door that was never meant to be opened, and it doesn't budge. I remembered the late nights with Halston Sr. before the stroke, how he'd sit beside me in the data center, sipping scotch and watching the logs scroll like scripture. Make it idiot-proof, he'd say. I did better. I made it arrogance-proof. Now I was watching the results, not with glee, not even satisfaction, just certainty. There's a quiet kind of justice in letting someone fail under the weight of their own ego. I didn't have to touch a thing. I just had to let go. Because rot doesn't start with fire. It starts with the decision to ignore the creaking. And they'd already painted over the cracks. The abandoned office sat 4 miles from the city center, tucked behind a long-forgotten sign that once read, Halston Freight, Field Unit East. Most people assumed we sold the building years ago. Kira probably didn't even know it existed. The company's younger hires had never stepped foot inside it. But I had the keys. Always did. I parked behind the building, cut the engine, and let the silence settle around me. Cracked windows, rusted security lamps, vines crawling up the side like nature was trying to erase the memory of what we'd built here. I walked around the back, reached beneath the warped drain pipe, and pulled free the old keycard sealed in heat-shrink plastic. Still worked, green light, soft click. Inside, dust danced like ash in the beam of my flashlight. I didn't touch the light switch. Power would stay off. That was the point. The air had that thick, dry smell of forgotten drywall and machine oil. But deeper in, down the side stairwell behind the old mailroom, the hum began. Faint, warm, alive. 3 years ago, I built a relay mirror here. Not a backup, not a duplicate, a fork, a shadow system that tracked every line of code, every financial transaction, every user access event that passed through Halston Freight's digital bloodstream. It wasn't illegal, technically. I'd gotten sign-off from the old man, Halston Sr., during our Redline Horizon security initiative, a paranoid pre-pandemic move to ensure company continuity in the event of corporate espionage or cyber collapse. It was supposed to be dismantled after the transition to cloud ops. I just never told anyone. I didn't. There, behind the row of rusted filing cabinets, was the false wall panel. I pressed my palm flat to the upper corner, right beneath the faded fire exit schematic. The mechanism clicked. The wall opened like a sigh. The room inside was sealed, temperature-controlled, and lined with banks of low-power servers and fiber conduits. A soft glow blinked across the racks. Heartbeat lights. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The system didn't require attention, only purpose. I stepped to the workstation, tapped the keyboard, and watched the terminal wake up. A blank command line. Waiting. Admin J. Mercer. Access protocol. Sentinel. Enter. And just like that, I was home. They called me old thinking, outdated. But this room, this system, it was recursive, self-cleaning, self-checking. It learned, watched, adjusted. While they were live streaming stand-ups and playing with UI mock-ups, I was still speaking to the machine in a language it respected. Code, redundancy, logic. First move was gentle. I rerouted select vendor payments, ones approved within the last 6 days, into echo loops. Not theft. They'd go out, but never land. Bounce back, delay, trigger flags, confuse accounting. CFO would assume a permissions misfire. CTO would start looking at API logs. Waste time, burn cycles, chase smoke. Second, I sent 3 fake purchase orders, high-ticket rush priority, to ghost vendors tied to deactivated shell accounts I'd created during the Kenya rollout. The requests would hit procurement, trigger automatic shipment tracking, and eventually get flagged as anomalies. But not before the system spat out internal alerts, compliance pings, and an executive summary, auto-forwarded to the board. I didn't need to lift a dime. I wasn't after sabotage. I was after clarity. I wanted them to see just how hollow their empire was without the one man who knew which pipes carried water and which carried gas. Within 12 hours, Kira fired Brandon Wu, CTO gone, just like that. No press release this time, just an internal memo filled with corporate gibberish about misaligned vision. I watched it all from that room. The terminal fed me heartbeat logs in real time, server spikes, admin resets, panic. And then, at 3:27 a.m., my phone buzzed. Blocked number. 1 text. I know. It was him. Her father. Halston Sr.'s stroke had stolen most of his speech, but not his mind. He wasn't watching from a hospital bed. He was watching me. I leaned back in the chair and thought of the last time I saw him in person. It was 6 months ago, the morning after he signed over control to his daughter. We sat in the executive wing, just the two of us, drinking black coffee from cracked mugs while the rest of the building buzzed about rebranding. He looked tired, not sick, just done. "If she ruins it," he said, his voice half a whisper. "Don't yell." I looked at him. He nodded slowly. "Just turn the lights out, slow enough that she notices the dark." I never forgot that. I'd hoped it wouldn't come to this. Hoped she'd listen, learn, ask questions. But some people mistake inheritance for mastery. They think because their name is on the building obeys them. Now it was time for the final step. I keyed in the Atlas trigger. Buried command. Never documented. It was a soft fracture point, designed to destabilize interdepartmental communication without outright destruction. Triggered only if 3 flags were raised in tandem. 1. False routing of critical funds. 2. Violation of internal protocol chains. And 3. Absence of active root admin credentials for more than 72 hours. All 3 had now been tripped. I pressed enter. The lights in the relay room didn't flicker. The servers didn't stutter. But a signal went out, across the system. Quiet, recursive. Subtle enough to evade immediate detection, but potent enough to scramble priority routing logic between departments. Sales wouldn't talk to ops. Ops wouldn't sync with dispatch. Dispatch would ignore finance. The machine wouldn't crash. It would just lose cohesion. A ghost in the system. My ghost. They took the architect out of the structure and expected it to hold. Now the roof was starting to sag, and I wasn't even breathing hard yet. They scheduled the earnings call for 9 a.m. sharp, Eastern Time, of course. The kind of detail Kira never paid attention to. Time zones, logistics, the boring connective tissue that holds a company together. She was always more interested in aesthetics, branding, buzzwords, momentum. She once told the board, with a straight face, that the real currency of business is vibe. By 9:14, the vibe had curdled. I listened from a private line, audio only, patched through a secure node in my relay system. No video, no name in the attendee list. Just my ears and the sound of a legacy unraveling. The CFO tried to open with a positive spin. We're restructuring into a leaner, more adaptive model. His voice cracked on adaptive. Investors weren't buying it, not after the reports, not after the leaks. 3 major clients pulled out in the past week. Lawsuits were brewing in 2 countries, Argentina and South Korea, over failed delivery guarantees, payment failures, communication blackouts. One lawsuit alleged that our automated dispatch system rerouted 40 containers of surgical equipment into a warehouse that hadn't existed in 3 years. That one made headlines. Then came the layoffs. Quiet at first, then visible. And once the press got a hold of the internal memos, particularly the ones Kira marked with "streamline with urgency," the damage was irreversible. Half the media ran with the phrase as a headline: streamline with urgency, bleed with precision. She tried to pivot on the call, claimed sabotage, a targeted disruption effort clearly engineered by elements of the former executive team. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. Everyone knew who she meant. She kept saying legacy code, as if I'd left a back door open and slithered through in the dark. But legacy code doesn't run strategic routing diagnostics or detonate vendor contracts mid-cycle. That takes precision, foresight, intimacy. You have to know where the levers are. And I did. They couldn't prove anything. I'd covered every trail, cleaned every echo, scrubbed fingerprints and metadata. No logs, no leaks, no evidence. Just consequences, like gravity. You can't see it, but you damn well feel the fall. I shut off the feed. 3 hours later, Kira showed up at my house. I'd been expecting that. I watched from the ridge across the street, binoculars resting on the hood of my truck, long lens pointed at the front door. She stood there for a long time, staring at the place like it owed her something. Then she tried the door. Locked. Of course. She circled the side, found the hidden key I left under the planter. Not because I forgot it, because I wanted her to find it. Inside, everything was pristine. Furniture in place, no dishes in the sink, no clutter, but no warmth either. Just empty spaces and vacuum lines on the carpet. She moved through the house slowly, checking photos, drawers, looking for something, anything. Upstairs in the master closet, she found the wall safe. I'd left the door cracked. Inside, there was no money, no documents, just a single yellow post-it note pressed to the metal back wall. The only virus was arrogance. She didn't cry. I didn't expect her to. She folded the note once, then again, then slipped it into her pocket. When she walked out, her face looked thinner, less like a leader, more like a child who realized the road she bulldozed was always leading off a cliff. I didn't follow her, didn't approach, just watched until her car disappeared down the hill. I stayed up there for another hour, remembering. The meetings, the mockery. She used to sit at the edge of the conference table during ops reviews, tapping her pen like she was timing contractions. Every time I spoke, she'd roll her eyes. Call my updates legacy logistics or pre-cloud paranoia. She once told a room full of department heads, "James is great at overcomplicating things that already work." Everyone laughed. So did I. But inside, I started building the contingency. She called me dinosaur, fossil. Once, when I laid out a phased rollback plan to recover from a vendor breach, she interrupted with, Or, we could just not break everything first. They loved her then. Young, sharp, full of gloss. They loved her until the noise stopped making sense. And now they were calling me. Quietly, after hours, blocked numbers, familiar voices. I know you're out, but if you could take a look at the load metrics. James, the EMEA channel is throwing 500 errors every 10 minutes. No one can explain it. Please, just 5 minutes. You don't even have to talk to her. I didn't answer. Not yet. Just listened. Logged the calls. Each voice a tally mark in a silent referendum. I was never their firewall. I was the architect of the vault. The one who knew where every beam sat, where every support ran, and what would happen if someone with just enough ego pulled the wrong lever at just the right angle. You don't hear your legacy break. You just notice the lights flicker, the air thin out. The walls feel softer than they used to. She wanted revolution. What she got was recession. And I hadn't even opened the second drawer yet. The bench across from Halston Freight HQ still creaked, the same way it did when I used to sit here on breaks. A subtle whine, low and long, like it didn't like the weight. The building across the street had changed. New signage, different glass tint, a curved canopy, meant to scream modernity. But underneath the polish, the bones hadn't shifted. I knew them. I built them. In my lap sat a plain black case. No markings, no logos. Inside, a secured biometric token, wrapped in leather and silence. I hadn't touched it in over 2 years. Not since the day Halston Sr. placed it in my hands with that look in his eyes. The one that understood legacy wasn't about what you built, but what you prepared for when others tried to tear it down. The board had forgotten that part. So had she. The screen lit up when I flipped the clasp. Cool gray, blinking cursor, waiting. I pressed my right thumb against the plate, felt the pulse of the scanner warm beneath my skin. Identity confirmed. Executive protocol. Legacy continuity. Final confirmation required. Proceed? I tapped once. The screen flashed green. That was it. No sirens, no fanfare. Just a signal routed through buried layers of our system, hand-coded to bypass public nodes and land in the inbox of every board member, each marked priority. Clause 17, initiated. A clause no one remembered, but I did. 2 years ago, in a private review during Halston Sr.'s last lucid quarter, we drafted a safety net. Something quiet. Something absolute. In the event of malicious disruption of operational integrity, combined with confirmed breach of internal systems by unqualified leadership, the system would revert to a designated continuity officer, a fallback, a stabilizer. Me. It was only valid if triggered manually, only active if biometric verified. No passwords, no proxies, just skin and truth. A dead man's switch for the living. I closed the case, stood slowly, and crossed the street. By the time I reached the lobby, the building felt different. Eyes followed me, not with curiosity, but recognition. Not fear, not exactly. Just that tight sense people get when they see someone they buried walking upright. The receptionist stood. "Mr. Mercer, sir, do you?" "I know the way," I said. The elevator ride was quiet. 8th floor, executive wing. I stepped out into the corridor I'd once paced through 100 times, back when meetings meant planning and leadership meant weight. Now, it was time to reclaim both. The boardroom doors were open. They were already seated, every member, eyes wide. No one spoke until I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat. Kira was not present. Of course she wasn't. Thomas Brandt, the oldest board member, cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer, we received your protocol." I nodded once. He looked down at the printed page in front of him. Clause 17. We'd forgotten it existed. You weren't supposed to remember, I said. You were supposed to never need it. They sat with that for a moment. Then Brandt asked the question they were all too afraid to voice. Is the company salvageable? I leaned forward. If we move now, reinstate key staff, shut down the vanity projects, cut out the rot. No one needed names. They all knew who the rot was. The vote took 11 minutes. Unanimous. By policy, the board had 48 hours to issue the formal ousting. But Kira didn't wait that long. Her resignation hit internal systems less than 5 hours later, quietly signed and time-stamped from her personal device. She didn't come in. Didn't say goodbye. Cody vanished from the leadership portal the same day. His podcast went dark. His socials wiped. I didn't comment, didn't celebrate. I just walked in on Monday morning and got to work. No welcome parade, no applause, just silence. The first order of business was the team. I brought back Diana from compliance, sharpest auditor I've ever seen. Rafi from operations, who once rerouted a frozen shipment around 3 collapsed ports using nothing but spreadsheets and caffeine. And Lena from systems architecture, because she never let ego outpace clarity. We entered blackout recovery mode. No external press, no marketing spin, just repair. At 5:22 p.m., I walked to the founder's office. The nameplate had been replaced with some minimalistic brass strip that just read, Chief Visionary. I removed it without a word, tossed it in the trash, and pushed the door open. The room was how he left it. Leather chair, wood desk, 2 chairs across from it, still angled like he'd just stood up for coffee. I walked around, ran my hand across the grain of the wood, closed my eyes, and sat. No title on the door. No ego. Just work that needed doing. They thought silence meant surrender, that age meant irrelevance. But I built the foundation they're now trying to patch. And no one patches a cathedral with glitter. I didn't come back to scream. I came back to restore. And that starts with locking the damn doors.